Picture this. You wake up on a Monday morning, make your coffee, scroll your phone, and every notification is saying the same thing. US and Chinese forces have engaged in the South China Sea. Not a drill. Not a standoff that got walked back. The real thing. What happens next isn't something most people have actually thought through. So let's go there. Because the first 7 days of a US-China conflict wouldn't just look like war on TV. It would reshape daily life for ordinary people in America, Britain, and Australia before the week is out. Before we go any further, if you find this kind of deep dive content valuable, hit that like button right now and subscribe. We cover exactly this kind of geopolitical scenario that mainstream news doesn't fully explain. Now let's get into it. Day 1. The markets don't wait. Within hours of the first confirmed engagement, financial markets don't just dip. They crater. We're not talking about a bad day on Wall Street. We're talking about the kind of circuit breaker sell-off that halts trading 3 times before noon. Why? Because the US and China together account for roughly 40% of global GDP. The moment military conflict becomes real, every algorithm, every institutional investor, every hedge fund on the planet starts pricing in the worst case simultaneously. Oil spikes. Gold spikes. The US dollar does something unexpected at first. It actually surges because in a crisis, the world still runs to dollar-denominated assets. But that's short-lived. Because within 24 hours, analysts start doing the math on what a prolonged conflict actually costs. For regular people, this hits fast. Mortgage rates, which are tied to bond markets, start moving. Pension funds take a visible hit. And your 401k or superannuation, depending on where you're sitting, looks different by Tuesday morning than it did Sunday night. Day 2. The Taiwan question becomes everyone's question. Here's what most people don't fully appreciate. Taiwan manufactures roughly 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. Not some of them. Not most of them. 90%. TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, is essentially the beating heart of the global tech supply chain. The moment conflict begins, every tech company on Earth starts sweating. Apple, Samsung, Nvidia, your car manufacturer, your hospital's medical equipment supplier, all of them are downstream of Taiwanese chip production. By day 2, tech stocks are in freefall. Not because factories have been bombed yet, but because the risk that they could be is now real. Supply chain managers start making emergency calls. Orders get frozen. Alternative suppliers, there aren't many, start getting flooded with requests. In practical terms, this means your next phone or laptop or car might suddenly have a very different delivery date. But more critically, hospitals start receiving advisories about medical device supply. Military planners already knew this. The public is just now catching up. Day 3. The information war goes public. By Wednesday, both sides are fighting 2 wars, one with ships and aircraft, and one with information. And here's where it gets genuinely complicated for people in the UK, US, and Australia. Chinese state media is broadcasting one version of events. American networks are broadcasting another. And social media, particularly platforms with significant Chinese investment or infrastructure, starts behaving strangely. Certain posts don't spread. Certain videos get flagged. Trending topics look different on different apps. This isn't speculation. It's exactly what military planners at places like Rand Corporation and the Australian Strategic Policy Institute have modeled. The information environment degrades almost immediately. Governments in Washington, London, and Canberra start issuing coordinated statements, but they're careful about the language. They're not calling it war yet. There are legal and treaty reasons for that. ANZUS, NATO's Article 5, these mechanisms exist, but invoking them formally has consequences that slow things down deliberately. Meanwhile, ordinary people are trying to figure out what's actually happening, and they can't fully trust what they're reading. Day 4. The supply chain starts showing cracks. You'd feel this one in the grocery store before you'd see it on the news. China is the world's largest exporter of goods. Full stop. But it's not just finished products people think about: electronics, clothing, toys. It's the components and raw materials buried inside everything else. Pharmaceuticals are a perfect example. Roughly 80% of the active ingredients used in American prescription drugs are sourced from China or India. and India relies heavily on Chinese raw materials to make them. By day 4, pharmacy chains are quietly getting calls from distributors. Nothing alarming yet, just questions about inventory levels, contingency conversations. But behind the scenes, supply chain directors at major retailers and hospital networks are pulling up spreadsheets and realizing their buffers are thinner than they'd like. Fuel prices are also climbing steadily now. The Strait of Malacca, the narrow waterway between Malaysia and Indonesia, handles roughly a third of global maritime trade. If Chinese naval activity threatens that corridor, shipping insurance costs explode overnight, and those costs flow directly into the price of everything that moves by sea, which is most things. People in coastal cities in Australia start paying attention differently. Darwin, Perth, these aren't abstract locations on a map anymore. They're within strategic range of things that are actually happening. Day 5. Governments start talking to their citizens. This is the day the emergency broadcast infrastructure gets used for something real. Prime ministers and presidents don't call this a war in their public addresses, at least not yet. The language is carefully managed. Armed conflict, military engagement, defending international norms. But the tone is unmistakable, and citizens read it correctly. In the UK, the government activates parts of its national resilience framework that most people didn't know existed. In Australia, the National Security Committee of Cabinet has been in continuous session since day 1, and now the public starts to see some of the outcomes: export restrictions on certain critical minerals, emergency protocols for fuel reserves, quiet conversations with Japan and South Korea about coordinated responses. In America, the president addresses the nation. Congress is called back from recess. And here's the thing people often underestimate: the U.S. military is already positioned. Carrier strike groups don't get repositioned in 48 hours. The planning and prepositioning for a scenario like this has been happening for years. What's new isn't the military response. What's new is that it's no longer hypothetical. Reservists in the US, UK, and Australia start receiving notifications. Not full call-ups yet, but the machinery starts moving. Day 6. The cyber dimension hits home. Most people think of cyber attacks as something that happens to corporations. A data breach, a ransomware incident at a hospital that makes the evening news and then gets forgotten. Day 6 of a US-China conflict looks different. China has one of the most sophisticated offensive cyber capabilities on Earth, and they've had access in various forms to critical infrastructure networks in Western countries for years. Congressional testimony and declassified reports have confirmed this repeatedly. The question was never if those capabilities existed. It was always when they'd be used. Power grid fluctuations start appearing in parts of the Pacific Northwest and the eastern seaboard. Nothing catastrophic, yet, but substations that should be running on autopilot require manual intervention. Water treatment facilities in secondary cities start logging anomalies. Telecommunications networks report unusual latency. None of this makes the front page on its own. Each incident looks isolated. But the pattern is unmistakable to anyone with a clearance who's watching the aggregate picture. For regular people, Day 6 feels like the infrastructure you've always taken for granted is suddenly something you're aware of. You notice when your lights flicker. You think about whether your phone is charged. It's a subtle psychological shift, but it's real, and it matters. Day 7. The world chooses sides slowly and awkwardly. Here's the uncomfortable truth about a US-China conflict that most people don't want to sit with. The rest of the world doesn't line up cleanly behind either side. Europe is in an extraordinarily difficult position. Germany's economy is deeply entangled with Chinese manufacturing. France has strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific but limited military reach. NATO was designed for the North Atlantic. Its application to a Pacific conflict is legally and politically messy. Countries like India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia don't rush to join any coalition. They watch, they calculate, they maintain communication with both sides simultaneously. This isn't cowardice. It's the rational behavior of nations that have their own interests to protect. And here's what that means practically. The economic pressure that the West applies to China, sanctions, export controls, financial restrictions, doesn't land the same way it did on Russia in 2022. China's economy is 5 times larger than Russia's. Its trading relationships span every continent. Decoupling from China isn't a switch you flip. It's an extremely painful, years-long process that was already happening slowly, and now gets forced into fast-forward under the worst possible conditions. By the end of week 1, no one is celebrating anything. Military analysts are sober. Economists are using words like unprecedented. And ordinary people in America, Britain, and Australia are doing something they haven't done in a long time. They're looking at the news and genuinely not knowing how this ends. That's the first 7 days. Not a Hollywood version. Not a clean narrative with a hero and a resolution. Just the mechanics of what modern great power conflict actually looks like when it starts bleeding into everyday life. If this video made you think differently about something, the supply chain, the cyber threat, the information war, drop it in the comments. I read them. Hit subscribe if you want more scenario analysis like this. And check out the video on screen right now. It covers how the US and China got to this point in the first place. See you there.